Hey, everybody, John Malanka, United Patients Group, and just finished another podcast with an old friend, Dr. David Bearman, MD out of Santa Barbara, California. And he's probably one of the most clinically knowledgeable doctors in this industry of medicinal cannabis. He is an author, he's an expert witness, as well as a physician still practicing. And he shares everything, his knowledge of what he's done over the years, from drug abuse to helping patients with cannabis, as well as talking about being a star witness for over 500 cases since the 70s. So hope you enjoy this. Leave your like button or hit the like button, leave your comments. And if you have any questions, as well as subscribe and share. And we'll see you soon. Enjoy. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody, John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. This segment is brought to you by Aspen Green. Aspen Green is just a handful of USDA certified organic hemp and CBD brands, and all of its hemp is grown from the perfect topography and climate found in Colorado. Check out why purity matters at aspengreen.com and follow them on social channels at Aspen Green CBD. Use promo code UPGCBD for 20% off. Welcome back, everybody. John Malanka with United Patient Group. Be informed and be well. And I'm here with an old friend, an old colleague, Dr. David Bearman. Some people say Bearman, but it's Bearman. He's an MD out of Santa Barbara, so I love that area down there. That's where I went to school, but still have family down there. And so hopefully when all this COVID disappears, I'll be able to come by and knock on your door and say hi again. But let me read your bio first off here. So Dr. Bearman is one of the most clinically knowledgeable physicians in the United States in the field of medical cannabis. He has over 50 years of experience working in the field of substance abuse treatment as well as prevention. Dr. Bearman was also, I say Bearman or Beerman? I said Bearman.
It doesn't make any difference.
I know, but now you have, but I'm Malanka. Some people say Malanka and I change it. So now I've been calling you Bearman.
I looked at it. It's funny. I'll tell you the little backstory here is it was sort of my way of striking out and showing my independence. So I transferred medical schools from Wisconsin to Washington, and I started calling myself Bearman when I was in Washington, and, I guess Beerman was, hey, there's beer in Wisconsin, there are bears in Washington, Bearman. And so my children they don't have any confusion. They're Bearman, all right? And my daughter is a stand-up comedian. She's got a master's in public health. She does stand-up comedy, and she has her own production company. She produces comedy shows with other comedians, and her company is called Bear Cave Productions.
Cave Productions.
Bear Cave Productions. And you want to check her out online. She's actually, she was in a contest in San Diego, a virtual comedian contest, and she made the semifinals. So they're going to have 10 comedians moved up to the semifinals, and she's all excited about that as well. So it's Bearman.
She must be a great storyteller, because I know you're a heck of a storyteller too. And so,
yes.
And Dr. Bearman, when we get into this, ladies and gentlemen, he loves history as well. So maybe we can get some history stories out of him as well. But let me continue here. You're a pioneer in the free and community clinic movement, which was in Seattle, the San Francisco Bay Area, and as well as Santa Barbara. His career includes public health, administrative medicine, the provision of primary care, pain management, as well as cannabis medicine. You've done a lot over your 50 years experience. You did a free clinic down in Santa Barbara. You've been an expert witness, or you still are an expert witness, as well as you're an author. And I have your book here, and great books. And so we'll talk about that as well. And you and I have done docuseries together, as well as a masterclass on pain and sleep. And maybe we'll touch up on that, pain and sleep, and because this is the topic that kind of goes hand in hand. And I still quote you every day. I mean, I have so many patients that call, and we talk about, pain. And I said, how's your sleep? I've spoken about you on my show with other experts, and I always talk about you and direct them back down to you. But welcome, man. I appreciate you coming on. You and I've done a lot over the years, and every time I call, you say, when can we do it? So I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. This is a mutual admiration society. I think that you have all the right motivations and an awful lot of information and an enormous amount of heart. So it's my pleasure to be with you today, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're doing well, you and your wife?
Well, actually, my wife is recovering from stroke-like symptoms that were associated with migraine, and she's making a recovery. She'll be back in the house on Tuesday. But thank you for asking. I know you didn't expect me to come up with
No,
something
I was
serious
hoping
like
you'd
that.
say she's wonderful. And you know
Yeah.
what? And I've had a lot of friends that have asked about stroke, and I quote you, and I don't mean to chuckle, but I always ask you, when's for stroke patients, when's the best time to use cannabis, and when is
Well,
it?
so the best time to use cannabis is anytime. If you've used cannabis before your stroke, you're going to have less neural damage than if you were cannabis free. But you can also take cannabis immediately after the stroke,
Yeah,
and that will decrease the amount of cell loss or
yeah,
loss of function. And Dr. Meshulam, who is recently they had a conference in Jerusalem celebrating his 90th birthday, and unfortunately we couldn't all gather there. I was at a similar conference in person for his 80th birthday, which of course was 10 years ago, and he developed a synthetic cannabinoid called dexabanol, which is useful for, was designed to be used for people who had strokes and had traumatic brain injury. And what cannabinoids do is they support vasodilatation. And what's happening when you have a stroke is that you're shutting down the blood supply to the brain. So this is one of the things that it does, but it also does other things besides just the obvious help that you would get from having vasodilatation. It's something that people should be aware of, and it's something that doctors should be aware of. I recently was a panelist with Greg Carter, who's the president of our organization, the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine, and Mitch Pyries and Stu, I forget Stu's last name, and it was for the annual conference on physical medicine and rehabilitation. And we had a very, I think, productive panel where we talked about not only, its use for stroke, but also, the use for anxiety, depression, anti-inflammatory, the whole ball of wax. And they are hoping to continue. They've made these presentations at a couple of previous conventions that they've had, and they hope to keep doing it. And it was a great pleasure to be on with them because they were very knowledgeable. Stu is involved, is a delegate to the American Medical Association. And, it's important for these doctors in the mainstream to be aware of all of the medical applications of cannabis. So it was fun to be there and exciting to see people doctors in that discipline be interested in this topic.
yeah. Well, it's starting. I think the stigma is starting to drop, and I think patients are starting to ask about it. And I always hear about this. It doesn't matter what state you live in, legal or not, or country you live in, legal or not. It's not illegal, I guess, in most places to ask the question. And
It's
so,
not. I'm glad you mentioned that because in the state of Hawaii, one of our members called up and said people are still getting harassed there, and he wants the state legislature to clarify that it's perfectly legal for doctors to give people advice. When you get your MD degree, they don't say, by the way, you need to check your First Amendment rights at the door. No, a patient can ask a doctor whatever they want. Now, if the doctor doesn't know the answer, if they're smart, they say, I don't know the answer. If they're real smart, they say, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out. When it comes to cannabis, they're real smart. They say, I don't know the answer, but call Dr. Bearman,
yeah, I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. That was
So
a softball pitch there.
Well, I pitched to myself,
Yeah.
that's
But you know what? You do fall in all those categories. I don't know. I don't know. I'll find out. And then thank you for sending patients because you do know about cannabis. And I didn't realize
right.
that about Hawaii. Earlier today I did a podcast with a woman on the East Coast, Claudia Morandi, and she specializes in protecting patients and patients' right as well as doctor right when it comes to writing prescriptions for opiates. She's someone who's a pain patient, and I told her that I was going to be on with you because we talked about pain, which is your specialty, sleep,
Right.
and how it's all almost like the domino effect. But hearing about Hawaii, that's surprising. That
I was amazed when I found that out, and I will send you a copy of the legislation that he wants the legislature in Hawaii to pass, basically telling the federal government, but really telling the people of Hawaii that they have every right in the world to talk about whatever the hell they want. If a patient feels that the advice that a doctor gave them was, off the map,
yeah.
they can sue them for malpractice. There are a number of, remedies, but the remedy is not to prohibit people from talking, from asking questions. And I think that we're going to see a dramatic continue to see dramatic change in the cannabis medicine arena. Kamala Harris has said repeatedly that the Biden-Harris vice president team are going to legalize cannabis. Which interesting is that this is a change in her position. As a matter of fact, when she ran for attorney general in California, one of the issues she ran against another Democrat was that she wasn't forcefully enough in favor of removing the legal barriers to cannabis. And now she's out there saying we're going to legalize cannabis. And, we in this country dodged a bullet. I mean, we almost missed losing our democracy. And everybody who's listening to this podcast needs to vote. They need to send money so that the Democratic candidates win Georgia. The candidates are normal people. They're running against two of the richest people in the Senate, people who don't really connect with the average human being. And I suspect people who have no appreciation for cannabis. Interesting thing about Georgia is, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a conference. I'm on the sewer board. I recommend anybody that's interested in politics run for the sewer board. As long as, when you push the handle, it goes down the drain, nobody's going to run against you, and
before you go on that story,
yeah.
Please share what your button was in Isla Vista when you ran on the sewer board.
Oh, well, I had a number of slogans. So the first time I ran was in 1983, and my button said, vote for Dr. Dave Bearman, get your shit together. And people came up to me and said, Dave, it's not the 60s or the 70s anymore. Well, I won. My next slogan was, he's number one in the number two business, which is a little bit more delicate, And I had a friend of mine who was an attorney. Actually, he was the best marijuana attorney in town, and then he became a deputy district attorney. And he said you should use your next time you're it should be eliminate waste, which covers the whole waterfront there. So get your shit together. Absolutely.
Well, good. Before we go into political, I want to say one thing, and I do hope they look at the cannabis ticket, and it doesn't surprise me that a politician, Republican or Democrat, whoever, does flip flops on that. There's a, yeah. There. I mean, Gavin Newsom. We're here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's done a lot. His family is here, and. But he got on the ticket with the cannabis team, I guess the group or society, and wanted the cannabis vote. And I remember Crid and I went to an event that was in San Francisco, and he says, "Vote for me. I'm going to, I'll be defending the rights in Canada." There's a gentleman that I met and interviewed probably back in July, and his name's Jim Bartell. And Jim Bartell is a father, and his son here in California, but his son passed of pancreatic cancer as well. And that's why it's near and dear to my heart. But they're up in Sacramento and in a hospital, and they wouldn't let, and cannabis was not their lifestyle at all. And they just said, let's try some other things. And so they got, Jim tried to get cannabis in the hospital for his son, and they wouldn't do it. And it took them 13 days to get it, and they moved hospitals, and they found another hospital, and his son passed, I want to say 4 or 5 days later, but he was awake, and he got to have a goodbye relationship with his son and his wife and the friends, and they saw the benefits of this. And it was disappointing because Jim just felt that he was robbed the last 2 weeks of his son's life, and he went and voted. It's called Ryan's Law. Ryan Bartell is his son, but Ryan's Law. And I interviewed him back in July if anybody wants to see that. But Jim went to both the Senate and the House, and unanimous on both sides of the aisle, California, of allowing cannabis use for patients in hospitals in terminal situations.
Really? That is true. Can you send me an email on that? Because I want to send that out to our membership.
Okay.
And let them be
ready
aware
for
of
this
that.
One? It's going to blow your bloody, mind.
Okay.
Gavin vetoed it.
No.
Yeah. And I just thought, you know what? That to me, that was shit because of a father, me losing my wife to pancreatic cancer and seeing a father do this, but both sides of the aisle, and it's in California. And that was the ticket that he stood on. That was a ticket that he came to the cannabis industry and said, vote for me. I have your back. And so that's why Kamala, however you want to call her, whatever you want to call her, it's, I hope she does what she says, and I'm not big on politicians. She still hasn't stepped down from her position as a Senate here in California. Why? I don't know. And what are we right now? December 18th. So
she'll step down when she's vice president.
Okay.
And the thing is that Newsom, to my way of thinking, has been kind of a disappointment. I think he's in over his head. I think there are other people that would have done a better job as governor. I think what's his name, Javier Becerra, would have been. He wasn't running for governor, but I think that he would have been. A much better choice. I think there are a number of other Democrats that would make better governors, and I certainly recently been a big fan of Jerry Brown. I mean, when he ran the first time, I thought he was too young. He was a year older than me, and I said to myself, well, I don't know anything. I sure as hell couldn't be governor of the state of California. And I mean, I think that Brown, he set the bar very high. He has a great balance between fiscal conservatism and social justice, and he knows how things work. He doesn't make a lot of false steps because he anticipates what's going to happen. And I mean, I think Newsom really didn't fully appreciate how to approach the pandemic. I mean, you can't criticize him too much because the last pandemic was in 1918. So, that was a while ago. And,
Dave,
he
as
certainly,
a politician, it doesn't matter what side you're on, if you're Republican or Democrat or neutral or everyone as the Green Party, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to make everyone happy. You're not going to make everyone happy. If Gavin would have done one thing, Trump would have done thing with the pandemic, they still would have been wrong. They still, So anyway, let's talk cannabis here and put everybody back in a.
Where I was going to tell you about Georgia is that I'm at the sewer board, the state sewer board.
It was my fault. I took a right at left at Albuquerque there. So go on.
So I get this call, and I'm wondering, I'm in Palm Springs, and my mind is 1,000 miles away, and it's a state legislator from Georgia. Now this was 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And parents are bugging him about the use of cannabis for Dravet syndrome. And we had a nice conversation. And I saw this guy was quoted recently in regards to the runoff. His last name is Peak. He's no longer in the state legislature. But I was very favorably or surprised that Georgia did legalize the use of CBD for epilepsy, and I'm sure this guy Peak had some role in that. And it's interesting to see legislators get educated. Patients out of time used to make a special effort to reach out to curious state legislators, and one of the people that went to their conference that was here in Santa Barbara in 2006 was a pharmacist, and I think he was on the Board of Supervisors at that time. He's now in the California State Senate, and his whole attitude towards cannabis changed because he understood what was being talked about. He was a pharmacist. He understood the chemistry, and I think that's the thing that's really disappointing about these politicians who take positions regarding cannabis that make no sense. I just wrote a piece based on something I wrote 4 years ago, basically knocking Jeb Bush and what he had to say about cannabis. And he was just completely wrong. 100%, 180 degrees out of sync with science. And, Jeb Bush is one of the more reasonable ones in the Republican Party. Now, to say something positive about the Republicans, some of the best supporters of cannabis are conservatives. Now, there are very few Republicans who are conservatives. Steve Schmidt just changed from Republican to Independent to a Democrat because so many of the Republicans are really fascists. But and the real Republicans don't really have a home anymore. But conservative Republicans, many of whom became libertarians, say like Judge Gray, understand that we should have the freedom to put pretty much whatever we want in our bodies. I mean, we have to take responsibility for that. And as physicians, we need to take responsibility for our advice. But getting back to sort of the original question, that does not mean that if a patient asks you, me, whatever, do you think that cannabis will be useful for treating my pain or for helping me go to sleep? We can answer that question. Yes, I do. No, I don't know anything. No, I don't. Any one of those three answers is perfectly acceptable. But to say I can't answer that question because I checked my First Amendment rights at the door, that's completely wrong.
It is wrong. And, we were fortunate with Corinne's father, which brought us into this industry back in 2010, that we lived in California, because the topic of cannabis wouldn't have come up as an alternative to helping someone who was ill as well as dying. And so, for those that live in illegal states that contact us every day of help, where do we go? You brought up Georgia. Corinne and I wrote an article about Georgia, the pretend state. And this was probably, Corinne's passed 3 years ago already, probably 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, where they voted, okay, we'll let you do it, but we have these other pharmaceuticals aren't working. One, right. You have to get it outside of Georgia, but you can't bring it back in. And so,
oh my,
it's that's why I was saying it's a pretend state. It's like saying, yes, here's your driver's license, David, but unfortunately we don't have any cars on our island, and you're not allowed to drive. And it's so I just think it's it just confuses the patients that are going through this, and so I like to see these laws changing. I'm liking that there's 35 states medically available for patients. I think we're at 15 recreationally. But the thing that needs to change is the qualifications. Qualified symptoms. A lot of states will say, yes, like California, everyone jokes and I joke about it. You can have hiccups and gas, and you can get a card for
Well, actually, it's
medical
useful
cannabis.
for treating hiccups and gas.
I
But
know, that's what I was joking. When I said that, I was like, oh well, I know he's going to say something, but other states and other families that we talk to on a regular basis, yes, epilepsy's. My child has epilepsy is legal. My other child who has cancer is an illegal patient. I just think that's wrong. And,
right.
and you and I've talked about that of gray areas in other states that pain's legal, but cancer's not. So you're say, wink, wink, you have pain, right? Yes, I do, doc. Here you go. Do you know Connecticut, I believe, just passed this last year, put pain as a qualified condition on their list. And and I know that's your specialty, is pain. And so let's go into this in pain and cannabis.
Absolutely.
And I want everyone to know, cannabis is not the golden pill, the golden ticket. It doesn't work for everybody. So this is not to give anybody false hope. And is not to replace a one-on-one with your medical professional. Dr. Bearman does see patients. Are you still seeing patients, or what's happening?
Yeah, I see, particularly for cannabis medicine recommendations. Okay. I mean, my bookkeeper has recorded a voicemail message that said I wasn't seeing new patients because she really wanted me to cut back. But it's the people that want a recommendation for medical cannabis, we'll make an appointment for you, and I'll do an evaluation. I think one of the things that patients like about me, I mean, obviously the ones that don't come and see me may not like me, but is that I explain to them why this stuff works. And I work with them in terms of the appropriate dosage and work with them about how to deal with any side effects that they might have. So I am still seeing patients. And the funny thing is that I was supposed to go into sort of semi-retirement, and I was joking with my office manager yesterday and said, I'm so goddamn busy, I better stop being retired. Because there is an awful lot that's going on in the whole arena of cannabis medicine. I was just speaking with the executive director of our American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine organization and two activists in Brazil. And a lot is happening in Brazil in terms of the use of cannabis as medicine. And I think what we need to be careful of here is that we don't allow the federal government and the large pharmaceutical companies to hijack cannabis as medicine. The federal government, in passing the MORE Act in the House, wanted to slap on a 5% federal tax. This is a medicine. What are we doing here? It's the reason that cannabis is Schedule I is to make it hard to do research. And then, of course, everybody agrees. The people who are pro medical cannabis, who are anti, we need more research. But you can't do it because it's Schedule I. I mean, I'll tell you, it's like a prelude to Trump in terms of having things that are just completely incongruous. We're going to set up these impossible barriers, these hoops you need to jump through at the DEA, the FDA, and the state government. And we're not going to let you may be able to do some research on cannabis in animals, but if you're going to do research with humans, you can only use THC. Oh, and by the way, it's the THC that really bothers us. And we've made that a Schedule III drug, or we've made cannabis a Schedule I drug. Absolute insanity, completely illogical, and I hope that we see more education. And there is, a willingness to open up on this, although most of that willingness, unfortunately, has to do with money. Take a look at Dr. Rand Paul. He owns, I don't know, five or 6,000 acres of hemp in Kentucky. I believe that Mitch McConnell, our old friend Mitch McConnell, is into the cannabis business in Kentucky. John Boehner, the former Republican Speaker of the was he Speaker of the House?
Yep.
Yeah. So Boehner is now the lobbyist for the Cannabis Industry Association. A kind of a funny thing is you know the writer Angela Baca. She used to be editor of Cannabis Now.
Okay.
For a while, she was the executive director of the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine, and she was telling me this past year, was it, I don't know, time flies when you're having fun, about a year or so ago, that she had a meeting in Florida with a fellow named Roger Stone, but unfortunately the meeting got canceled because he was indisposed. Her meeting with him was supposed to be a week or two after he got arrested. And she also said, and this is disturbing as well, she's writing a book on this, that in Ohio and Florida, the Russian oligarchs are heavily into the cannabis industry. So, you know, the world is a strange place. And the cannabis arena, while at one time I think it was a refuge from the strangeness, or at least you could understand or know what that strangeness was, no, it's just part of this weird world that we live in.
It's a growing world, this cannabis industry. I had a gentleman on the show the other day who I think you guys would get along, and his name is Michael Patterson, and he's doing a lot overseas. And you know, they have illegal THC grows in Africa, South Africa of all places. And,
really?
And they are importing to Australia and Germany. And I mean, that just blew my mind. And they're legal, you know, legal stuff. So, but I was flipping through. My aunt sent me these, and the little jokes, one-liners in it. I'm past what you were saying, but this is we could certainly slow the aging process down if it had to work its way through Congress. Talking about Congress. And that's Will Rogers. So I'll send you these. My aunt sent me these things here. Bob Hope. I don't feel old. I don't feel anything until noon. Then it's time for me to take a nap. Bob Hope. You know? And anyway, I know that's your type of sense of humor too. So when you're
exactly
Congress earlier, I'm like, oh, I got to go find this thing. That's what I was looking at too. So on the top list of people coming to cannabis, you always have sleep, anxiety, depression, cancer. Those are like the top ones that people come in. And we've done a show on a master class on pain and sleep, and you know, how they're tied in with each other. You know, you mentioned that a lot of times when you have lack of sleep, the pain in the body, the depression, the anxiety, but it also has a lot of times the same symptoms what fibromyalgia patients feel, of just pain throughout the body. Can you talk about, you know, how cannabis works as an analgesic in the body and why it doesn't work? Because it didn't work on Corinne, and that was the one thing that Corinne would just like, how is this not working on me? We've studied it. All the studies show the benefits of cannabis and pain, and where she found pain relief with her pancreatic cancer, for those of our followers who, this is my wife, was getting in the bathtub or getting in the hot tub, and the negative buoyancy would take the pressure off her stomach. You know, instant pain relief. And she didn't want to be on any narcotics and cannabis. And she was not a cannabis user, but, you know, vaporization and different oils and tinctures she was using just to attempt to kill this bloody thing called cancer, to pain relief.
Let me ask you a question in regards to dose.
Yep.
Is what I found is, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years. So when I first started out, I would sometimes offer people the option of getting a prescription for THC, which of course is legal and has been since 1985. And you know, comes in 2.5, 5, and 10 milligram dosages. And so I would start people off, you know,
Are you talking Marinol? Or are you talking
Marinol?
Excuse me. Okay.
Marinol, cannabidiol. Yeah. So, because, in early 2000, there were a lot of people that came in who it was hard enough for them to, get it together to see a doctor. And then the doctor's going to tell them to go to a dispensary where they're going to see a 22-year-old kid, tell them to smoke this dope, it'll be really good for you. They feel a lot more comfortable in going to a pharmacy, seeing a pharmacist who's wearing a white coat.
Totally.
And what I tell my patients still about Marinol is that it's more expensive than cannabis, doesn't work as well, and has more side effects. But in many cases, it works. Now, in terms of pain, nobody or almost nobody got any benefit from 10 milligrams of THC. And when I bumped it up to 15 milligrams of THC, then people started to get pain relief. And some people started complaining about not liking the euphoria, or they even had a touch of dysphoria. Dysphoria means you feel uncomfortably out of touch with reality. And so, you throw in an equal amount of CBD 1-to-1, and there you go. So I don't know. Everybody's different. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is different. The causes of pain are a little bit different. And there's certainly a hell of a lot of pain with cancer and pancreatic cancer. Yeah. So the question that I would ask is, did you try a wide variety of dosages?
And it's a great question. When you said dosage right before you started your talk there, we did try a bunch, and at the same time, it's hard when she and I, our relationship was just on every level. We were connected, and communicating, talking was something that was big. And it's tough because I've talked to many patients with like spouses saying, oh, it's just so hard to see my loved one just sleeping and drugged out, if you want to say, because they're so high, which a lot of patients go through and probably need to battle. And that was a tough thing. And she and I talked about it. She didn't want to be out cold. She didn't want to avoid the conversation that we were so used to having. And, I don't know if I would change anything of what we did except give her my pancreas, give her my liver. And I even volunteered that, man. And,
Hey, look, we all would like doctors and researchers to be geniuses and to have all the answers right now today.
Yeah.
Cannabis is an anti-cancer drug. I have a good friend of mine who called me up, who has pancreatic cancer. And I've talked to a couple of people. Well, Liz Rogan has worked with cancer patients, some of them with pancreatic cancer. Stacy Shemansky has worked with people with pancreatic cancer, and worked with some doctors at Cedars-Sinai, which I'm impressed that doctors would, lower themselves to work with a layperson. And I say that as sarcastically and facetiously as possible. When you take a look at the use of cannabis for cancer, you need to use very, very high doses. And a person is going to feel out of it. Now, in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, they develop tolerance to the high. It may take 10 days, it may take 2 weeks, it may never happen. Now, the way in which you deal with that, or ways to deal with that, one way is to use suppositories, and apparently that's more common in Europe and using cannabis for cancer. Now, I've heard two explanations for why you don't get as high when you use a suppository. One is that the floor of the pelvis is served by 3 different veins, only one of which goes directly to the liver, where it would be metabolized into 11-hydroxy-THC, which is more of a euphoriant than delta-9 THC. And the other two would distribute this more into the other bodily fluids, the interstitial fluid. So it's going to take longer, and you're not going to have that peak either of THC or of 11-hydroxy THC. Other people have said that the mucosal membrane, whether it's rectal mucosal membrane or under the tongue, that there isn't as much absorption. And I think we have to be very careful of a lot of misinformation or a lot of misreading of the information, because you hear a lot of reports of the benefits of sublingual application, or even vaginal application, or rectal application. So I think we need to be careful about some of the stuff that's out there, because there are some well-meaning people who still let their cultural bias get in the way.
So I'm going to stop you on that one, because so let me ask you before I go here. Do you think suppositories work for cancer patients?
Yes.
Okay. So Corinne and I don't care if someone says, eat this pen, 10 of these pens, it will help. And when you're going through cancer, you better believe someone's to say, hey, it worked I'm going to try it myself. So Corinne and I did an article, because we worked a lot of patients that have had success with suppositories. Mm-hmm. And we wrote an article that said, is the posterior superior? Mm-hmm. And it was about cannabis suppositories. Mm-hmm. And your two good friends publicly blasted me and my company and my wife. Hergenrather, your two good friends, Hergenrather and Fred Gardner. And it was
well, we'll talk about when we're off the line here. We'll talk about my two good friends.
It really. I didn't mean to, because I know you've done a lot with them, but I just said, how, you know what? I mean, it was disappointing that they said that, because
it's very disappointing.
It was. We had this whole thing of doctors arguing on our site, other oil makers arguing on our site, and some people we don't even talk to anymore because of that article. So it's good to hear. You know, I don't want to ever give anybody false hope, but when you see patients that are, we've talked about the placebo. They have placebo out there. This is double-blind placebo cases, even with placebo, that sometimes the placebo works, and taking that hope away. And we've talked about hope, you and I, before. So anyway, I didn't mean to say you're saying.
No, that's okay. And I'm glad you named who it was, and we can talk about that, because I don't really want to talk about them. I want to talk about what they said. And the fact of the matter is that number one, there's more than enough anecdotal reports to justify saying that suppositories work. My guess is that they maybe have been looking at the mucosal absorption and jump to that conclusion. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about we really need to look at research with the jaundiced eye, because you have people that will just grab onto something. Now, recently, I got online, and I won't go into the backstory, but I was looking for non-embolic, non-hemorrhagic reasons for a person having symptoms like a stroke. Mm-hmm. And so I saw that the Cleveland Clinic said that there were certain drugs that might do that. And then they said cannabis. And they had a case. What was the case? What was the evidence there? The evidence was this was a 60-year-old African-American who had diabetes and hyperlipidemia, and they found a 9-carboxy THC in his urine. That does not mean that that's what caused this man's stroke-like symptoms. Furthermore, cannabis is a vasodilator, not a vasoconstrictor. And in this particular instance, the actual cause was not cannabis, it was migraines. And migraines are something that are cause vasoconstriction and are known to result in symptoms that could mimic a stroke, because it's the same thing, a decrease in blood supply to a critical part of the brain. And I'm kind of reminded of one of the most outrageous pieces of junk science related to cannabis. The guy who in the 70s, one of these zealots, and he had a preconceived notion of how he wanted his research to turn out. So he exposed monkeys to cannabis smoke and then sacrificed them, and he couldn't find any damage. So he figured out they're not getting enough. So he fitted them with gas masks and then pumped in all kinds of marijuana smokes. And sure enough, when he sacrificed them, he proved if you deprive monkeys of oxygen, you will get brain damage. He didn't prove anything about cannabis. It's just, you have to read the damn research, and you have to look at it with a critical eye. And if you have something that somehow doesn't fit with what you know to be true, then you need to find some other explanation for what the outcome of that particular study was, why it doesn't fit with 100 other studies that say exactly the opposite. And it's really critical to not jump to conclusions. And it sounds to me like they may have jumped to a particular conclusion. By the way, going on to something that is also controversial, but is not going to cause these altered state of consciousness, and that's juicing. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Bill Courtney, who's in Dominica now. And Dr. Courtney told me
he's running. He's this mythical, object like Rick Simpson. Always on the run. Yeah. Where is he now?
Yeah. So
where is he now?
He's in Dominica, which is an island, in the Caribbean. And about every 2 or 3 years, his house gets flattened by a hurricane. But anyway, he called me up a couple of months ago and said he was going to go talk to the Minister of Health in Dominica and encourage them to, because they have a lot of farms that aren't operating because of COVID, and they've been really hammered because they're a tourist destination. And he's trying to convince the Minister of Health that they should make Dominica a site where people can come for cannabis treatment. It's a small island. They're going to have a hard time competing with Brazil and Australia and New Zealand. But nevertheless, I think it's great, and he's a big proponent of juicing. And of course, we know that the raw plant, all of the cannabinoids are in the acid form. And if THC is in the acid form, THCA, and has a carboxyl group, it's going to affect the way it fits into the CB1 receptor, and you're not going to get high. However, if you take the juiced whole plant, it does have anti-cancer effects. So, I mean, when you have these objections or you have these questions that come up, it doesn't mean that we should get into these silly arguments of what it is or what it isn't. It's that we should do further research. I remember I was kind of at the last minute asked to be on the Ricky Lake show, and they had a 9-year-old girl that had been treated for cancer, for leukemia. It's a little bit fuzzy, the backstory, because the parents were kind of using her to raise money and all that stuff. I found that out later. So what's her name? Former editor of Kush magazine. His name escapes me right now. But so they wanted to have a debate between two doctors about whether giving cannabis to a 9-year-old was a good idea. And the person who was on the other side was Dave Smith. I just got a Christmas card from Dave. He sends me a Christmas card every year. Dave Smith started the Haight-Ashbury Clinic. And Dave Smith was getting hassled by some people over at the Haight-Ashbury Drug Treatment Program. And so he installed me as co-director of that. So, I mean, I know Dave pretty well. And so Ricky Lake was very, very upset because Dave and I are friends.
Yeah.
And we were able to disagree without being disagreeable. So we got very little airtime. Most of our conversation ended up on the cutting room floor. The only thing that we really agreed on was that more research was needed. And of course, that got cut out of both of our comments.
Oh, wow.
So we do need more research, and these questions are important. And rather than point fingers at each other, let's point fingers at the researchers and at the barriers to research. And let's take a really close look at some of these questions which still need to be answered, or questions that have been answered but are ambiguous enough that some people have been fooled by it.
And that happens quite a bit. And I've learned a lot from you over the years. And, yes, more research needs to be done. I've even shared with because we have a lot of people that call us that don't live in legal states, and they're going through pain or sleep issues. I keep on going back to that, but cancer and stuff like that. And I say, you know what you can do, as Dr. Bearman has publicly spoken about, is get your doctor to write a prescription for Marinol. Mm-hmm. And then you can get your CBD and kind of, I know one's synthetic and one's is most cases whole plant is preferable, but sometimes you have to, MacGyver some things, make some things work, or become a part-time cannabis refugee, go for a little break and go to see if even cannabis does work for you before you uproot your life and your family and your doctors and your community. And so do you still feel that way?
I do. As a matter of fact,
you're chuckling, so I don't know.
Yesterday I was talking to one of my in-laws, I won't mention who it was, who asked me about a topical, and which one I preferred and so forth. And I said, well, all the topicals have, they can't have more than 0.3% of THC, and your CBD is going to be very good for anti-inflammatory, but it's not going to do a lot just as an analgesic, as a plain analgesic. It may decrease your pain because the inflammation is contributing to your pain.
You saying it may increase your pain?
No, decrease. Did I say? I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I'm talking so damn fast here. So. Yeah, the CBD may decrease your pain by decreasing your inflammation, but the THC is a direct analgesic. And in fact, I have my father's 1927 Remington's textbook of pharmacy. He was a pharmacist. And it tells you on page 999 and 1000 how to make tincture cannabis, and that it was useful in treating pain and anxiety. So I told him exactly what you just said to your audience here is go and get the topical, that's going to have CBD and make sure it has a wide spectrum of terpenes in it. Myrcene is a good one to find in there. And I said, have your doctor, or, I can write you a prescription for dronabinol, and, just take a pin and stick it into the capsule and squeeze that THC into your topical product. If let's say you get 5-10 milligram capsules, that's 50 milligrams of THC, and that's a pretty good amount to slather all over your skin, or to mix it into a 1 ounce container of a topical that's whole spectrum CBD, and that's going to give you more relief than just the whole spectrum CBD with the terpenes in it. And the other thing I said is, look, there's a laundry list of maybe 5 or 6 different terpenes that are useful in treating pain. Another 5 or 6 that are useful in treating inflammation. You can get any of them without a prescription. So I mean, all of that is very important, and I think very useful to know. The barrier or the problem with plant-based medicine is that plants refuse to be simple. I mean, it's not like a pharmaceutical company that says, let's see if we can figure out the one main contributor to this plant's therapeutic effect. Well, there may be one main contributor, but in the case of cannabis, there are 500 molecules, over 140 of which are cannabinoids, over 200 of which are terpenes, and many of the cannabinoids and many of the terpenes have therapeutic value. So this is why, I tell my patients that the plant is better than the THC. And I was at Nimbin.
You mean the plant's better than, and when you say THC, you still talking Marinol?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm reminded of I've been in Nimbin a couple of times. I was a speaker there, and the people in Nimbin are lovely. They have the second longest drug policy protestival in the world after Hempfest in Seattle. I think it's been going for 30 years in Nimbin. Nimbin is a town of about 800 people, and during their protestival, it has about 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So they have a parade on the first day and a parade on the last day. It's a 3-day long festival. And one of the signs that they have that they carry in the parade says, "The plant, the whole plant, and nothing but the plant." And I really like that sentiment, but any port in a storm, if you live in a state, look, who's making these laws? Guys who, I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, guys who weren't smart enough to get into medical school and therefore became lawyers are the ones that are making these laws.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because Corinne would always say, I think before these lawmakers make these laws, they should do on cannabis, should take a course about medical cannabis before they make these laws, to really understand what's going on and what they're doing, how they're helping or hurting patients. And sometimes, as you and I both know, ailment, cancer, pain, sleep issues doesn't discriminate. And maybe it will, maybe it will affect someone in their life in some way, in their circle. And so again, before they make these laws, they should do some research. They should take a course on cannabis. I think all of our politicians should, before they just start saying, "Oh yeah, put the signature in the bottom on the dotted line too." So, what else have you been doing? I mean, I know you're a witness.
So let me tell you about the cases I'm working on now, because
please. Those are always interesting.
So there was a case in.
I brought that up because that was another softball pitch after your lawyer comment.
So one group of bureaucrats that annoy me probably more than any other.
Only one? Come on, only one.
Are the people in Child Protective Services who seem to not have the time to save children who are being tortured, whose relatives are repeatedly complaining to them about what's happening to the child, and the child dies, but they do have the time to take children away from parents whose children, say, have autism, that are receiving cannabis. So this case, they really picked on the wrong people, because these people had money and they could hire an attorney. So the parents had a 9-year-old who they got a recommendation from a doctor for the use of cannabis. What does Prop 215 say? Doctors can make recommendations for the use of cannabis. For what? Well, we were talking before about the list, the restrictive list.
Yeah.
There's no restrictive list in California because of the late Dr. Todd McCurry. Dr. McCurry was a great old friend of mine. I knew him since the 60s when we were both volunteering at the Haight-Ashbury Clinic. And one of the lines in Prop 215 that was there only because of Dr. McCurry was that doctors could recommend it for migraines and nausea or any other medical condition for which the physician believes it's useful. So this doctor had every right in the world to recommend it. The parents, of course, had every right in the world to ask him for it. And the child became a little bit drowsy. This child had been doing all kinds of self-injurious behavior. and she stopped doing it or markedly decreased it. And the self-injurious behavior would have been worse than any side effects. So they have these people now have a really good attorney, and I'm working on that. And
this is the case going on now.
It's going on right now. Yeah. Then there's another case in Michigan of a guy who was actually a grower who they were fixing the road, and he made a left turn, and the sign said no left turn, and everybody that lived in that neighborhood did that, you know. So I guess he was unaware that the sidewalk was closed, and there were a couple of kids walking in the sidewalk, and he didn't expect them to be there, and one of them got hit and died. And the guy had used cannabis, you know, 10, 12 hours previously, had an elevated THC, is driving as it was described, you know, in the police report. And it wasn't described as weaving. It wasn't described as slower and more carefully. He passed the field sobriety test. They took him to the hospital. There were no neurological problems. And the DA wants to make a political point, and so he's charging the guy. He had a previous DUI, so he has the ability to charge him with second-degree murder. And they found a toxicologist who just came in and tortured the research. Said things that were not consistent with the research, and this was the expert that the state chose to use. We're just at the deposition stage, so I mean, you know, the trial has been put off and put off and put off because of COVID, but I have had a number of driving under the influence second-degree murder cases. None of them have ended up in a conviction for second-degree murder. Not that they didn't do something wrong, not that they didn't commit some crime, but driving under the influence of cannabis was not one of the crimes that they committed. And it's really upsetting to see the criminal justice system abused in this fashion. I mean, to charge somebody, it underscores what you said, that these folks don't understand the science. They don't understand the endocannabinoid system. There's so many things out there that need to be addressed, that to see us wasting our resources on things that aren't crimes, it itself should be considered a crime. It's a waste of taxpayer money and a waste of bureaucratic time. Anyway, that's one of the things that I'm working on. Another thing that I'm working on is I got a couple of publishers in Brazil that want to translate my book into Portuguese, and I've done some presentations for audiences in Brazil, one of which had Portuguese subtitles put on that. We've got a recent call from a doctor who moved to Thailand about 3 years ago. And apparently Thailand has figured out how to stand up to the pharmaceutical companies. And they have their own
cut your hands off, because I know they're pretty strict on their laws over there.
Yeah, but they are okay with cannabis as long as the government controls it.
Wow.
I mean, this guy is talking to the Minister of Health. He's got all kinds of modern technological bells and whistles. I don't know who's funding him, but it sounds to me, from what he's told me, that he's got people standing in line to fund him because of what he's going to accomplish. But the government of Thailand does not want this screwed up by for-profit pharmaceutical companies. And what this fella wants to do is he wants to do what you suggested: educate the policymakers as well as educate the doctors in Thailand. So when you're in the cannabis space, people come up with all kinds of fantastic ideas. This is a fantastic idea that the more I hear about it, the more it's grounded in reality, and the more it's something that has a real possibility of existing. And that is sort of getting the government of Thailand in the medical cannabis business.
Yeah. Just like, you've been to New Zealand. Kurt and I have spoken to New Zealand, their drug parliament.
Right.
And before COVID, they had come to us saying, "Hey, would you come over and do some education?" Because they're at the same thing of they're looking to us, meaning the United States, of the leader. And sometimes I had a couple of people on recently on my show. One was from um, Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I'm blank. Elena Goldberg. Do you know her?
What's her name again?
Elena Goldberg.
No, I don't. But I know about 4 or 5 of the people in Mushulam's lab, but I don't know everybody.
She's there. And then I was speaking with Mary Biles over in the UK, who's written a book as well. Where was I going through this, David? I don't know where I was going with this. But education, I know, doing things over with New Zealand. Oh, I know. People turn to us, meaning us, the United States, as a leader of education in cannabis. And it's funny, I think a lot of the Americans look at Israel as blowing doors on us on research, and Asia is, Canada north of us, South America, and it just seems like we're in the stagnant thing, slowly getting. I mean, we should be up here also talking about that.
Exactly. And I think that it is a demonstration of the power of the pharmaceutical companies, but it's also a demonstration of the power of racism.
Yeah.
As you know, my first book, Drugs Are Not the Devil's Tools, How Greed and Discrimination Led to a Dysfunctional Drug Policy and How to Fix It, fingers that drug policy has been used to marginalize, discriminated against groups for centuries. Right now, African Americans and Hispanics are in the box, but you go back, say, to Prohibition, and it was the Irish that were in the box. Or you take a look at the Harris Narcotic Tax Act, and it was the Chinese that were in the box. And there's an enormous amount of irrational policy related to the use of substances, particularly substances that are psychoactive. Now, the reason that the kind of original stigma was placed on cannabis had nothing to do with its psychoactive effect. It had to do with its therapeutic effect. And who was it stigmatizing this? It was the Pope, of course. Pope Innocent VI, in the end of the 15th century, at the beginning of the witch hunts, came out and said that cannabis was a tool of the devil because it relieved pain, specifically the pain of childbirth. And of course, we all know that the pain of childbirth is Eve's punishment for eating from the tree of knowledge. And we have these kinds of lingering absurdities that stick around for centuries and centuries, which we're supposed to be beyond the superstition space, and we're supposed to be in the place where we're taking a look at science. And as we've seen with global warming, you have people who just refuse to look at reality. It's the snow is fucking melting. The icebergs are going away. Isn't this coming about as a result of warming? And is this something we should do something about? Anyway, I go on. You're asking wonderful questions,
I share with the audience that you're a historian and you have a lot of knowledge in a lot of things, and I like that because I'm like that as well. I know a little about a lot. Is that how it works? How it goes? A little about a lot. And
right. I'm a general practitioner, which means I know a little bit about an awful lot.
There you go.
But I'm a specialist on cannabis, and so I know a lot more about that. I don't know nearly as much as I'd like to know, but I do know an awful lot about cannabis, and I want to know a lot more.
Yeah, and I learn every day as well. Let me rewind, since you knowing a lot about cannabis, you being an expert witness. You've been an expert witness in over 500 cases since the 70s.
Correct.
You mentioned the gentleman that in Michigan that took that left turn, and the outcome was he hit a child and the child passed.
A teenager, actually,
but still, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
but just
yeah.
have that. Just, I can't even imagine, that happening. One, for the parent side, but also for
Oh yeah, it's
having that on your
nobody wins. Nobody wins in this kind of situation.
No one wins, and but you talk about it. If you and I smoked a joint 2 nights ago, it would still be in our blood today, 2 days later.
Yes.
And so is it nanograms? Is that the right measurement?
Nanograms, right.
Nanograms. And so it would still show up in the blood today, 2 days later, 48 hours later, that John and David, who smoked a joint 2 days ago, in a system, and something, God forbid, something happened to us while we were driving, it would show up in our system saying, "Oh, you guys are intoxicated." That's a tough one, and it depends on, say, if you and I smoke 10 joints a day compared to one joint, it shows how much is in your system 2 days later, and that's the measurement. How do you? I mean, you must get those as an expert witness
all the time.
And so how do you explain that? Because it's really, I don't believe cannabis 2 days later has any. I mean, you and I can go have a normal conversation here. You can drive. You can run your business, run your practice.
Well, it happens. Yeah, it happens that I do know an awful lot about this little bit, and I've taught a number of courses, and so this is a short course for the jury on the endocannabinoid system and the effect of cannabis. And the fact of the matter is that if you are a regular consumer of cannabis, that you will be able to detect THC in the blood for up to a week after last use, and you'll be able to identify the metabolite 9-carboxy THC in the urine for 3 to 6 weeks. What I point out to the jury is that this toxicology screen proves that you use cannabis. That's not the issue. The issue is where they impaired. Now, I am helped by the Department of Transportation, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the Food and Drug Administration, who all have no problem with the use of cannabis so long as it doesn't interfere with your driving. Is what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says. There's no increased risk of automobile accident as a result of driving. They say of cannabis use. They say this because of all the research that's been done. They also say there's no relationship between the THC level in your blood and impairment, and that if you are impaired, you drive slower and more carefully. And so I tell the jury this, and I mean, my job is to educate. My job is to be a presenter of the facts. The jury then takes this and decides what is not applicable in this particular case. And each case, has its own nuances, is a little bit different than the other. And so you have to rely on the jury being educatable. And it depends on the attorney. We had a great case in a place called Florence, Arizona. Now, the main business in Florence, Arizona is putting people in jail.
I was going to say bonds.
Yeah. So they have a state prison there. They have the local jail. I don't know if they have a federal prison. They have lots of prisons there. Okay. And it's just a little town. 5,000 or 6,000 people at most. So I was told that, and I thought, well, this juries like to be a little bit pro law enforcement. And I mean, these cases, when they get won or lost, it's the attorney that wins or loses them. It's not their expert witness. But the way they use the expert witness. And this guy, I mean, he was so innocent. It was unbelievable. And they wanted to just not tell the truth. I mean, he had been seen 10 minutes before he was arrested by two cops who told him to get out of there. He was threatened by another guy. I won't go into the specific details. I may have already said too much. But anyway, they said, you get out of here. He was being threatened, and he had his kids in the car, and the kids were acting up. And one of them, they stop, and one of them jumps out of the car. The cops come. 10 minutes later, different cops, and they say, "Whoa, this guy's," and they test him and all that sort of stuff. And they say, "Well, he's under the influence, so it's child endangerment." Blah blah blah. He was acquitted. He was acquitted. And what I liked is that the attorney was very relaxed, and I think in order to sort of remove any stigma that I might have coming from Southern California, said, "So, Doc, tell me about this." I mean, he referred to me as Doc. And I thought that perfect. And the jury understood, and the jury paid attention. The question was, was he impaired or not? And the answer was no, and the jury got it. And now, an interesting thing here is that the federal government knows that the field sobriety test is inaccurate. And it's only 25% more accurate than chance for alcohol, which is what the field sobriety test was developed to test. And it's, as the chief of police of Ojai, California, said in the panel that we were on when I pointed out the problems with the field sobriety test, is he said, well, no, it's only supposed to be used, in the field in order to see whether it's possible that the person, and so that I thought that was interesting, that it's not proof. It raises your level of suspicion, and maybe it's proof enough to arrest the guy, not necessarily proof enough to convict the guy. Those are two different levels of proof that you need. And it's nice to be able to be in a situation where you look at the evidence and you say, this doesn't hold water. I mean, I don't have to prove, or the attorney doesn't have to prove that they were not under the influence of cannabis or that they did not use it. They have to raise reasonable doubt as to whether or not their driving was impaired. And I look for that in the toxicology results, and I look for that in the description of the stop by the officer. And I look for that on the results of the field sobriety test. So the field sobriety test is inaccurate enough that the federal government has given a grant to a guy named Michael Milburn, who's a professor at the University of Massachusetts, for a device that he calls the Druid advice, which stands for driving under the influence of drugs. And it is something that can scientifically tell if you're impaired. Now, it doesn't tell you what you're impaired from, but it gives you some objective numbers, some objective results, as opposed to standing on one foot. Now, I got another case where this guy was,
and just for our audience, we're not a proponent of smoking a joint and driving either.
No, here's the thing with that, is that here's what the Food and Drug Administration says. Okay, we don't have to give advice. The federal government has good advice out there, and their advice on Marinol, which is right THC, it has the what can I say? The euphoric effect, and it has the standard psychoactive drug warning that the Food and Drug Administration puts on all psychoactive drugs, whether they're opiates or benzodiazepine or stimulants, what have you. And the warning says, warning, do not drive, operate heavy equipment, or engage in dangerous activity until you determine whether or not this interferes with those activities. And that's the advice I give my patients. And then I suggest to them that hey, you need to be careful. You need to be extra careful because even if it doesn't interfere with your driving and you're using it regularly, they test your blood, they may charge you. So, I mean, it's one of the things that physicians need to take care to do is to give people adequate information. Now, there was another case that I was in. This was very unique in that in almost every case that I testify in having to do with driving under the influence of cannabis, the question is, were they really under the influence of cannabis? In this case was not like that. This case, the person was under the influence of cannabis and it had a terrible outcome. So this was an Asian American whose mother disapproved of her use of cannabis, who used it for anxiety. She goes and gets a Skype recommendation, and the doctor tells her to take indica. Now, you know as well as I do that the terms sativa and indica had historical meaning and have no meaning now. And this is not just my opinion. This is the conclusion that was reached by Dr. Ethan Russo, who I consider to be the most knowledgeable clinician in the United States on cannabis, and also by John McPartland. I think McPartland is a scientist, although he may be a DO. He definitely knows his stuff. And they have said,
I get people that email me all the time, John Malanka, John McPartland, and
I
get that all the time, and I say, I appreciate it. I'm not him. I'm not him. But
yeah, he's a very knowledgeable guy. So, I mean, what they said is you need to take a look at the cultivars, type 1, type 2, and type 3. And so that's relevant in this case because, you know, indica indicates the cannabis that came to the U.S. from India. Sativa is much more closely akin to what we call hemp. Hemp and cannabis are what Linnaeus called cannabis. You know, it's a distinction without a difference. They're the same plant. So indica is the one that will get you high, and sativa is the one that won't. And most people have it backwards. So this doctor says, get yourself a sativa. So she goes to a dispensary, gets a sativa, and lucky for her, it wasn't a sativa. That is to say, it was high in CBD and low in THC, which is just what she needed, right? So because her mother disapproved, she was still living at home, she would stop at a parking lot on the way home and take a couple of hits of cannabis and go on her way. So the dispensary gets closed because turns out they didn't have a license. So she goes to a licensed dispensary, goes in and says, I want a indica. And the bud tender, who in California don't have to have any training, and he didn't ask her what it was for, and he goes, indicas are over there. So she goes and picks out something that has 25% THC and less than 1% CBD. She, has been using this stuff for a year from this other dispensary. That was the other way around, high CBD, low THC. She stops in the parking lot, parked where you're home, takes 2 or 3 hits. No, think about this. If you have a gram of cannabis, which is about what the government sends out to the people on the independent new drug program. And it's 25% THC, that means there's 250 milligrams of THC in this joint, in 1 gram of a marijuana cigarette. And you take 3 hits off of it, you now have consumed 25 milligrams of THC. I don't know about you, but to me, that's a pretty healthy dose. It's certainly more than I would recommend that a person start with.
Yeah.
She goes down the road. She has a panic attack. She crosses the median. She hits a car head on. The passenger is killed. The driver is maimed for life. So they wanted to charge her. They did charge her with second-degree murder because she had a previous DUI. And the issue there would be if she purchased the cannabis with the intent of getting high, and she didn't.
No.
Fortunately, the attorney was able to convince one juror that she wasn't guilty of second-degree murder. So they found her guilty of other things, but they hung up on the second-degree murder. And apparently the DA felt that they might have the same outcome again, so he didn't recharge her with that. And I think she wasn't able to make bail. She'd been in jail for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
I think she was released with credit for time served. The sad thing, of course, is that the person who was killed is still dead. The person who whose name is still named. Yeah. And I point my finger at the state of California for not requiring bud tenders to be trained, and for not requiring dispensaries to be pharmacies. I am opposed to dispensaries. I'm in favor of pharmacies that only carry cannabis or other natural products if that's what they want to do. And remember, my father was a pharmacist. He had an assignment in 1928 at the University of Minnesota School of Pharmacy to make tincture cannabis. And according to the literature, American physicians wrote 3 million prescriptions a year in the 1920s that contained cannabis. And there were more than 25 over-the-counter preparations that you could get in just about any drugstore in the United States that contained cannabis. And the AMA was very supportive of the use of cannabis for medicine. In 1937, they testified against the Marijuana Tax Act. In 1942, the longtime editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association, Dr. Morris Fishbein, recommended cannabis for migraine headaches, and that echoed the words of Sir William Osler, who was considered the founder of modern medicine and wrote what's thought to be the first textbook of internal medicine in 1892. So, I mean, you have a lot of unfortunate things that happen because DuPont wanted to make money. They are the ones that are responsible for the Marijuana Tax Act. While Hearst and Anslinger had a little input, it was not their doing. They get credit for something that was really DuPont's doing.
Point the finger at DuPont, huh?
Huh?
I said point the finger at DuPont.
I always point the finger at DuPont, and I normally characterize it as circumstantial evidence. And I gave a presentation at a satellite conference we had up in Portland before the Patients Out of Time conference. And I can't remember, this fellow from Baltimore, whose name I should remember, who knows a lot of stuff, said, well, do you have any hard evidence of that? And I thought, oh, shit, no, I don't. And I usually say, it's circumstantial. And here's the circumstantial. We don't have the smoking gun, okay? So the circumstantial evidence is this. First, in 1916, George Schlichten invented a decorticator for harvesting cannabis, which not only harvested the hemp, but also prepared it for industrial use. So it cut the labor costs in half and made it competitive with, say, wood pulp for making newspapers, which is one of the reasons why, Hearst got his fanny in a bun. And he was able to stop not the Scripps Howard chain from switching from wood pulp based newsprint to hemp based newsprint. And he had been in correspondence not only with Schlichten, but also with Timken of the Timken Rollerberry Company, who thought that this would be better for the environment to make newsprint out of a annual replenishable plant rather than the trees that going to take 20 years to return. So his patent, he dies in 1924, Schlichten. And so his patent runs out in 1933. And other inventors, look at the patent and improve on it. And so this is going to make hemp even more available. And why is DuPont concerned about hemp? Okay, so the hemp herd, the core of the hemp is cellulose. Well, who cares? DuPont cares, because dynamite depends on cellulose, and they made dynamite. They're a munitions manufacturer, right? They also make cellophane, which is synthetic, made out of cellulose. They also make nylon, which is a synthetic, made out of cellulose. They also have the North American rights for rayon, cellulose. Furthermore, they make sulfites that are used for making paper out of both wood pulp and hemp, but you need 4 times as much of the sulfites to make paper out of wood pulp as you do out of hemp. And lastly, and most importantly, we go to Henry Ford, that old radical Henry Ford, who always felt that cars would run on ethanol, most likely hemp ethanol. So if they had done that, we would be crabbing about big ag now, not big oil. And we probably wouldn't have the problems we have in the Middle East. So Ford came up with his, for lack of a better description, the hempmobile in the late 30s. It was a vehicle that the skin was an acrylic embedded with hemp. The upholstery was made out of hemp. The stuffing in the upholstery was made out of hemp, and it ran on hemp ethanol. Well, why would DuPont care about that? Well, they made tetraethyl lead, an additive for gasoline, and even more importantly, they were the largest shareholder in Ford's competitor, General Motors. And I urge your audience to go look up on images and Google and put Ford and hempmobile, and you will see Henry Ford, a picture of him with a sledgehammer whacking the fender of this car, and the sledgehammer just bounces off. The car had a nice acrylic skin with hemp in it, and it ran on hemp ethanol. And that is why we had the Marijuana Tax Act, because while Hearst may have had the political clout, Anslinger certainly didn't. Anslinger was just trying to preserve his job. He was the first director of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, and he had the responsibility for alcohol, and now that was going to go away. And he really wasn't going to have a large bureaucracy with cocaine or opiates. And he had been said that these attacks on cannabis were foolish before he became director of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. And he sort of changed his tune because he saw a good opportunity to become a bigger bureaucrat. Oh, and he also was a racist as well. So we had to
throw that in there, huh?
Yeah, throw that in there. I mean, he said that cannabis was used by African Americans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans.
Screen. Here's that hemp plastic car was 10 times more dent resistant than steel. And there he is with a sledgehammer. I don't know if you can see it. And we made this United Patients Group tile. Gosh, I don't know how long ago I did this. 2012, maybe I made this tile. But yeah, there's that picture. That's that famous picture there. So,
yeah, and this is one of the things, by the way, I assume this is a fundraising thing. You tell me how much it is and I'll contribute some money to get that, because I'd love to have that tile if you still have any.
Oh, no, that's mine. I'll send it over to you. I'll send it over to you.
Okay, so one of the things that DuPont was concerned about was that you could make plastics out of cellulose. You could make plastics out of hemp. And they were hampered by the fact that everybody, the majority of people in the U.S. in the 30s knew what hemp was. They knew what cannabis was, but people really were not aware of what marijuana was, that it was exactly the same thing. When the AMA testified against the Marijuana Tax Act, their guy who testified, Dr. William C. Woodward, doctor and attorney, former commissioner of health of Washington, D.C. and Boston, Massachusetts, past president of the American Public Health Association, referred to the word marijuana as a mongrel word. And he said that the AMA almost didn't know they were talking about cannabis, because that's not what this is called. It's called cannabis. And should be called cannabis today, by the way. Hey, I think we're a little bit past wrap-up time, and I appreciate you letting me just wander off wherever I see something.
Just for our audience, David and I have done these podcasts, live Q&As in the past, and I think our longest one was 2 hours and 20 minutes. So this is I knew we were going to go along on this here too. But I always love having you on. I appreciate everything you do. So here's a recent book, and I have my signed copy, but it's Cannabis Medicine: A Guide to the Practice of Cannabinoid Medicine, Dr. David Bearman. And I don't know Maria Pettinato. Pettinato, is she down there in Santa Barbara?
She's a pretty remarkable woman. She's on the faculty of the Seattle University School of Nursing, which is a Catholic university. I kind of like that. Cool. And she was at the conference in Baltimore where I delivered a talk, and I had a booth, and came up and talked to me. And her involvement has been very important, because I tend to be a little bit sloppy. I have too much going on and stuff. And she has insisted that, this be properly footnoted and stuff. Now, you're having the first edition, and anybody who wants it, they can just contact me via my email, David Bearman. That's BEARMAN at Cox.net, and ask about it. Or you can go to Amazon. Yeah. Except I get to keep more of the money if you come to me. But go to Amazon.
Contact you, and that's Cox, COX,
right.
.net.
Yeah, and we're working on a later volume. So, but right now we still have plenty of these, and that later volume is in the process of being laid out. It has almost the same stuff in it, and the book is, I think I mentioned earlier, on the verge of being translated into Portuguese, which I'm pretty excited about.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for mentioning the book. I appreciate that.
Always. I love supporting you as well. And then you also have a membership drive for our physicians that are listening out there. Can you talk about that? And I'll put that up there as well.
So in about 2005 or 2006, there were a number of us who were regular participants on the medicine panel at the Hemposium at HempFest in Seattle. And we were disturbed by all of the media attention that this doctor in Venice was getting, who had a gal in a bikini out in front of his place saying cannabis recommendation is $39.95. And there are a few other things I want to mention, but we said, look, this is undermining the credibility of the medical utility of this plant. What can we do to marginalize this guy, without giving the medical board a club to beat us up with? And we said, why don't we create a organization that certifies those doctors that are practicing good quality medicine? So our goal of the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine is to get the medical schools to teach about the endocannabinoid system. In 2014, only 13% of medical schools did. It's a little bit larger now. And also, we wanted to see cannabis as a subspecialty. And we accept into our membership anybody can become a certified cannabinoid medicine specialist who has the ability to recommend medical cannabis. MDs, DOs, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, naturopaths. It's different in different states.
Actually, I don't think naturopaths, because our doctors are naturopaths, and they cannot. They've been told they cannot recommend.
But that's because you're in California. If you were in Washington, yes, I know I'm in California, but I'm not a naturopath.
Yeah.
So in Washington, naturopaths can.
Where Maria's out of, correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, here in California, that means that doctors have more political clout than naturopaths. Yeah. That's why naturopaths can't do it. It has nothing to do with their training, which is actually probably much more appropriate than MDs. But we also will accept laboratories, businesses. Look, as the late Jess Unruh, who was a political kingmaker here in California and Speaker of the Assembly for a long time, used to say about money. He said, money is the mother's milk of politics. Well, money is the mother's milk of nonprofit organizations. And so we would, and also if you don't have to be a physician, you can be a nurse, you can just be somebody who wants to support cannabis. We have information on our website, which I think is aacminfo.com. aspengreen.org. We've been refurbishing our website. I think we've got all of the bugs out of it. We're putting more bells and whistles on it each day. If you have any trouble getting on that website, contact me at David Bearman
Cox.net.
Yeah, David Bearman, Cox.net. You can go to my website if you want, David Bearman, MD, .com. I'm sorry.
Give me the links or have Rihanna put it. Rihanna, what's your
Rihanna? That's the name of my office manager.
She's wonderful. So Rihanna runs Dr. Bearman's office, and she's fantastic. So if you ever call in, you may get her, but she's wonderful. And I thank you for everything that you do, my friend, and wishing your wife a speedy recovery first off, but give her a big hug from us. And I thank you for being on.
Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me, and good luck to you and your organization. You do fantastic things, and I look forward to the opportunity to get together with you face to face in the not too distant future.
Well, we've had some good times together, so we'll do it again. And but I'll get your information out with Dr. Bearman's book as well as his organization. And thanks again, Doc. John Malanka, United Patients Group, be informed and be well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody, John Malanka with United Patients Group, be informed and be well. This segment is brought to you by Aspen Green. Aspen Green is just a handful of USDA, that's right, USDA certified organic hemp and CBD brands, and all of its hemp is grown from the perfect topography and climate found in Colorado. It is a family-owned business and is deeply committed to the science of providing only the purest hemp and CBD products for the best results and most beneficial experience. Its mission is to bring the therapeutic value of pure, organic hemp and CBD to people who seek supplemental relief through the use of healthy, natural products. Aspen Green is free from toxins and runs up to 8 different lab tests from bona fide third-party labs throughout its product line. It holds in high regard 3 foundational principles that guide every aspect of their business, actions, and interactions with their customers, partners, as well as their community. These are quality, integrity, and transparency. These will always remain at the hearts of their efforts to bring their beneficial products to consumers. Check out why purity matters at aspengreen.com and follow them on social channels at Aspen Green CBD. Use promo code UPGCBD for 20% off. Again, UPGCBD for 20% off at aspengreen.com.